You're listening to the GRCC Provost podcast.
What'd you have for lunch, Noah?
He's not answering you.
It was just...
I bet it wasn't worse than what I had.
What did you have, Lauren?
I had Cheetos.
Ooh, that's it?
I had a bag of Cheetos. Not like a big bag, like a little individual bag.
Chicken tenders and fries.
Awesome! That's healthier than Cheetos.
Not by much.
See, my thing is I know we got to start, but I bring a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like every day. And I run into Dylan Carr, who always has this like reheated gourmet leftovers that he and his wife made the night before. I'm always jealous of his lunch. And I eat my peanut butter and jelly.
You had the healthiest item, though. I think it's...
I did win for healthiest in this
you did.
particular
All right.
comparison.
Alrighty. Greetings, persons of quality. Today, I have with me as my guest someone whom I envy very much. She has done the thing, I'm sure she's done many things I wish that I had done, but she has done a thing that I wish that I had done, and that is she attended graduate school in Chicago. How cool is that? I attended graduate school in South Bend, Indiana. I don't need to say any more. With me today, Kate Byerwalter, professor of psychology at GRCC. And you told me you've been at GRCC how long?
Since 1998.
Wow, right out of grad school.
Right out of grad school.
So
got married and moved here and started this job all within a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we know you can handle a lot of stress.
That's correct.
And you were getting used to, you'd left Chicago for Grand Rapids.
That's also correct.
That's a kind of a big shock.
Yeah, it was a big change, but we're settled now and things are good.
You're glad you came.
And I love it here at GRCC, yes.
Awesome. So you also told me you are here to talk about service learning.
Yes.
And you told me that you have actually been incorporating service learning into your classes for as long as you've been here.
Pretty much. I think it was maybe within the first 2 years that I came here, I started experimenting with adding academic service learning into my courses.
Was service learning as well known at that time, or was it a fairly new movement in higher ed?
I think it was more new. I mean, I was such a new faculty that everything was new to me.
Yeah, sure.
But I feel like we're a little bit more, much more established now that we are part of the experiential learning department. Mm-hmm. We have our service learning team, which I want to talk about a little bit too, because I think there's some exciting things going on there.
We'll absolutely talk about your service learning in your class and the service learning team. I don't want you to worry about that.
Sure.
But I always start with a little kind of get to know you.
Sure.
So I've shared with our entire listening audience, probably at least 10 people, that you've been here since 1998. Your field is psychology. What sort of inspired you to say, this is a field that lends itself well to service learning?
Well, I think you just summed it up. It is a field that lends itself really well to service learning. Especially, I've used it primarily in my child psychology course. I think I might have done it in general psychology at the beginning. I can't remember, to tell you the truth. But it works really well for child psych because when I first came here, I knew I wanted my students to observe children and or teenagers in some capacity, and there just wasn't room at the preschool lab at that time. So that was really what made me look into getting out into the community, is kind of selfishly wanting my students to have that experience.
Mm-hmm. Your specialty in the field of psychology is developmental psychology?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the things over the years that you've asked your students to do that involve service learning?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Well, I have done so many different things. I had to list some down because I've done everything from going as a class together we used to go to Grand Rapids Montessori School, and my students would tutor kids through Schools of Hope, which was a reading program. So that was where we would I think we took maybe 4 sessions of the semester and went there. And then I've also done things where, like currently right now, my students have a choice of 3 different placements, one of them being WIMCAT, which is totally cool. It's a teen program, and they offer classes for GRPS students in art, photography, fashion design, and then my students will be there really just acting as mentors and interacting with the GRPS high school students. And then also there's a program called Fit Kids 360. And so some of my students will be working there, and it's really being, again, kind of a mentor, working with the families, talking about nutrition, good eating habits, and working out, those kinds of things. And then the Grand Rapids Children's Museum is always just a really no-brainer in terms of allowing students to go and observe children. And then the key to service learning, is to relate it back to your course learning outcomes. That's key. There's just so many things you can see at the Children's Museum that we also talk about in class. And then my students have done Circles Grand Rapids, Family Promise, Arbor Circle, the Gay and Lesbian Center, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. There's been a number of them. Because I have also experimented with having my students choose their own placement and then have it approved by me. And I still do that in my online courses in particular, because I could have a student taking the class from Iowa, So as long as they can give me the person's contact name and I can verify the information that it seems like a good fit and that it meets our learning outcomes, then I'm fine with them finding their own place.
I'm going to go back to one of the organizations you noted. The audience may have sensed a sort of pregnant pause when you said that some of your students had worked with Fit Kids, and they talk about things like healthy lunches. So, question, if one of your students were faced with 3 options, bag of Cheetos, individual size, okay, chicken tenders and fries, or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and they had to give advice on which of those 3 is the most healthy, what do you think your students would say?
You're really going to make me answer this one, huh?
Yeah. I want it on tape. Tape. How's that? No, don't you love that tape? We're on tape, kids. Yeah, you need to answer. Yeah.
I have to go with peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, I would too.
Ding, ding, ding.
Clearly, that is the most virtuous item to choose for lunch. Okay, so now back to serious stuff. You said something that's I know is really important for service learning. It's great to be of service in the community. It's great to do service in and of itself. But the idea is that it ties to your specific curriculum.
Right.
So it sounds like you've worked with pretty much every service organization in the community. Can you tell us how an example of the student work, how it met your learning outcomes for the course? I mean, what was specifically kind of that correlation between the service and what you're teaching in the course?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, what I did was I created a assignment that went along with the service learning experience. So I have a list of topics that we talk about in class, everything from peer relations to temperament to gender to parenting to self-esteem. And then I say, go out and look for examples of those in your service learning experience. So that kind of helps make that connection pretty strong. But it could be for, another thing that I do is I have my students evaluate themselves in their reflection papers about our institutional learning outcomes. So not just my course outcomes, but also here at the institution.
Do you mean the ILOs?
Yes, I do.
Awesome.
Yes. So the critical thinking.
What are those 4 ILOs?
The critical thinking, communication, and social responsibility. Is that correct, Provost?
I think there's another one. Personal skills.
Responsibility.
Personal skills.
That's one thing that I really like about having them do that, because For example, there's some ILOs that you really can't make happen in a classroom. So like critical thinking skills or problem solving skills. But when you have a student that's out there interacting with a child who suddenly throws a tantrum, or throws something at you or is arguing with another child, you got to kick in those problem solving skills fast. And I had a student last semester, Julia Barron, she's on to U of M now. She worked with Circles Grand Rapids, and Circles Grand Rapids helps women who are in poverty and trying to get out of poverty. So Julia would work with the kids while the mothers were at a meeting, and she also had dinner with them as well. But she really had to think on her feet. She came up with lesson plans to do with the kids, and she had a young boy who suffered from autism in her group. So she had to try to navigate how do I run this group with this boy not really being part of the group. And it was, I think, pretty emotionally taxing some nights because the kids she worked with were between maybe 8 and 14. And they loved her, and they would share with her stories that not everyone would even want to know is happening in a child's life. And so that kind of experience that you gain and developing those problem-solving skills and communication and just awareness, you can't get that in a classroom. So that's just one example of why I think it's so valuable. And I also think that as an instructor, to do service learning, you have to be willing to let go of some of the control because you're not there often, and you can't make sure that it goes exactly how you wanted it to go. So you have to be willing to be flexible. And you have to be willing to give some time to work with the community partners. So, in that example and in other ones I've had, I am keeping in contact with the supervisors there throughout the semester, kind of problem solving things and helping as well. So you have to be willing to do that too.
I hate giving up control.
That is the hard part. I don't know if that's, a consideration people have, but you do have to be flexible that way.
Sure. You actually sent me a note late last year, academic year, and you said, hey, we should talk about service learning on the podcast. And I said, great, we'll do that, and so here we are.
So I invited myself, really.
I don't want to shock you or anything, Kate. Let's just say people are not beating down the door to get on the Lori podcast.
Well, okay? They should be.
They should be. What is it you wanted to make sure that you let our listeners know about? What is it you had to communicate about service learning?
Well, I really wanted to share a little bit about our service learning team. So we're housed, Mike Shavy is the leader as the head of the experiential learning department, but Melanie Sheely-Gady also heads things up for us, and we have
exercise science.
Yes, exactly. And we have John Rumery is an adjunct faculty member who's
business
done a wonderful job. He really is creating this database of community partners. So he's really reaching out. He's the one that introduced me to WMCAT. So we have that. And then, of course, Lee Kleinert and
biological sciences.
And Dylan Carr.
Anthropology.
Yes. And Jody Gee.
Exercise science.
So they've been working together on this department initiative along with people from Aquinas and also Grand Valley. And one of the things that Dylan has looked at kind of from a research perspective is the differences in how these schools are implementing service learning. And just to keep it brief, he was sharing with me that really the top level of the institution, if they are supportive of service learning, more faculty are willing to participate in it as well. That's one of the differences that he has seen. And so we just have some neat things to the department initiative going on. And if you look on the website for the service learning website, there's all kinds of resources. Like if you were a faculty member saying, I've always thought that would be a great idea, but I just haven't done it yet. Just get on there and start start reading tips from other faculty that have been doing it for a while. And John Rumery would be willing to meet with you as well, and one-on-one, and just kind of think about what some of the options might be. Because again, I think that when my students leave my classroom, they will remember some of the course material that we've learned in class, but they will remember most of what they've done outside of the classroom through their service learning.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that's the biggest benefit?
I think there's a number of benefits for students. Mm-hmm. I think it's also depends on where the student is at. So, for example, when we went to an orientation recently, the woman said, well, okay, students, send me your resume, and then we'll get in touch and set something up. And when we got back to class, a couple of them said, I'm not going to do that one. She wants a resume. Like they weren't there yet.
Yeah.
So for some students, it may just be making a presentation and presenting it to a group of high school students or something like that might be the experience. But others are ready for, like what Julia did, the weekly interactions and really diving more in deep. But I just think there's so many benefits to it for students. It makes the material more meaningful to them, I think, when they can be interacting with real people. Mm-hmm. And again, obviously child psychology lends itself very easily. But for example, WMCAT, I want to speak with the art department because I think that it would be a great fit for those students as well. And it's right here on Fulton.
Mm-hmm. What most feeds you about having a service learning component to your class? What's the upside for you, for the faculty?
Oh, I don't ever think about me, Lori. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, let me think about you. I mean, I'd like to think that the faculty gets something out of this.
Yes, I agree totally.
I know you never would think that way, but I will lower this discussion.
I would say that it's very rewarding to me. And I'll be honest, there's been some years with some placements or how things are going that I've said, why am I doing this? Like, this takes a lot of work. Mm-hmm. But usually I come back to this is just such a good experience for students. And I learn through them about these agencies that are out there. So that helps me kind of keep more in touch with things. I love it when students have like a really positive interaction with a child or a teen through it. And I love it like when they come back and say, hey, I actually ended up getting an internship there, or I'm working there now. Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's really fun.
You said it's sometimes you'd ask yourself, and it just doesn't surprise me, we've all asked ourselves, why am I doing this? It's so much more work. What is the level of extra work commitment this requires?
That's a great question. Well, so for example, for this fall, I was changing my placements from previously. And so I started in June, really starting to make contact with the agencies. So it takes additional time. You have to kind of plan ahead of reaching out to agencies. And again, the service learning, experiential learning department can help you do that. Mm-hmm. And then, so that's really it, getting the placement set up and like figuring out when, like I like to have an orientation for my students that we go there together, because I have found that so many of them are scared to pick up the phone and call and ask. So I kind of try to help them through that by doing an orientation. But you wouldn't have to, in my online class, I don't. Again, they're on their own to find someone. But that's really it. It's not an overwhelming amount of difference, to tell you the truth. Mm-hmm. I think the benefits outweigh the extra work,
Yeah. What haven't I asked that you wish I would?
Ooh, let's see.
And you, if you had notes with you, you could look, but you don't.
Well, let's see. From the back of my mind, what comes to mind? Let's see. Mostly, I just want to say that, to me, if you are thinking, a faculty member is thinking about doing academic service learning, get in touch with the team and people can walk you through it, and just kind of have an open mind. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least you've given it a try. And I think, having a reflection piece for your students at the end of it is really important too, so that they can tell you what their experience really was like. Like I always ask them to tell me about the staff that you worked with, and did you think anything that this agency could improve or those kinds of things. So again, just trying to improve my students' critical thinking skills as they're going through too. But no, I just think that I would love to see more faculty give it a try. I don't think it's as time intensive or as big as some people think it is to do. So I really would encourage them to consider it.
Have you ever had a student just say, I'm not going to do that, I don't want to do that?
Oh, great question, yeah. So I have had explored with this a little bit, because I have it required, for example, for my child psych course. But I think I'm going to change that, because I think some students have said, oh, no, I'm not going to take that class because they're service learning, because they all go back to their schedules. I don't have time in my schedule. But I will tell you that almost every student I've had who does service learning in the end goes, I am so glad I did that. It really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, But I do say to them, if you absolutely don't have time or this doesn't meet your schedule, I have an alternative 25-page paper that you can do.
Oh, Kate.
No, it's not that long. I'm just kidding.
Wicked.
Well, I
love it. If I would have, I was such a shy kid, I would have chosen the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. You probably shouldn't give them even an option.
Yeah. Well, that's probably true.
I'm kidding. Obviously.
But I do know what you mean. And I do think that as a student, the ones who are, a little more outgoing, or like when I worked with Family Promise, a student who had experienced some financial crisis in her own family, she was perfectly comfortable with the experience. But other students, it was a real stretch for them to interact with people, who were different from them or who had different experiences. But again, to me, that's the benefit,
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I do have an alternative assignment, but I don't encourage that.
Is there some service learning project or assignment that you've been thinking of that someday I'm going to do that?
Ooh.
And you just haven't, for some reason you haven't done it yet? Is there like some goal out there in the future?
No.
That's okay.
Because to be honest with you, I'm not good at that idea kind of a thing. That's why I rely on the service learning department or team to help me with that, because other people are good at those great creative ideas. And then I just follow it and roll with it.
Where is the service learning office?
The service learning office is located within the experiential learning department on G2 of the main
G2
building.
Is the same one as Subway.
Yeah, on the
It's
same
G2.
floor as Subway, right?
That's how we know. It's on the same floor as Subway, which I know I get G1 and G2 confused.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears for just a minute, because you're a psychologist, and I'm sure people have lots of questions for psychologists, right? So I have a couple.
Okay.
You're all right with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Will there ever be, or is there, to your knowledge, a class in something like the psychology of pets?
Oh, interesting. Actually, on NPR the other day, did you hear them talking about training cats?
What? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I feel so current. I feel like I'm talking about the same things that they're talking about on NPR.
Yes.
That makes up for the whole tape comment. I think.
Yes, it does.
So training cats, yeah? So what did you learn?
Yes. I just heard just a little bit of it, but the one thing was that two, especially female cats that live together, they sometimes don't want to share the same litter box. And I have a friend who's having this issue. Her one cat will use it and the other always goes behind the couch. So she's dealing with that. But yeah, that would be, I actually think a lot of people would sign up for that class.
So there could be a class about figuring out your cat's your dog.
I think it would be more of a behaviorally oriented class. Not so much.
Not like figuring
not psychoanalysis on your cat.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Wow. I guess you have kind of a mechanistic view of pets there, Kate.
Well,
Are you saying that they don't have deep psyches?
I think that they do. I don't know how to get at it.
Okay. All right.
Being a dog lover myself.
Wow.
I know. Sorry. Interview's over.
No, it's not over. Do you think, now another sort of question for you, do you think that a person's choice of pet says something important about their personality or their temperament? Or who they are deep, deep inside?
First, you have to tell me what pet you have.
Cat?
Oh, yeah, a cat
You don't know
lover.
that? You're not listening to the end of the podcast, are you?
Oh, not the very-
You're doing exactly what people tell me they do. We listen through the interview.
Oh.
That's all right. It's all right, Kate. It's all right. That's why there's not...
Actually, I do remember this now because I think you did say it at the beginning of one of the podcasts once about your cat. Yeah. But I warned you before we started that I have a bad memory.
That's all right. We're
It's all good. What was the question?
A person's choice of pet says something deep about the person.
I'm sure it does.
We learn a lot from
I'm
a person's
sure it does.
pet choice.
I'm sure it does. Cat people probably very insightful, very personable, and smart and high achieving.
Good looking.
And, let's see, good looking. And what else can we throw in there? I'm sure there is scientific evidence to back that up.
Yeah, you're probably right. That's okay. That was good. Good catch.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to end the podcast a little differently today.
Okay.
I usually have my set tagline for the two people who listen to the very end. But the last podcast that I recorded, I was with some students from Upward Bound. And Christine, one of the students, said one of the most important lessons she took from her experience in Upward Bound could be summed up this way. You want it, go get it. So that's for Christine. I like that message. That's today's closing. You want it, go get it. Boom.
That's nice. I like that. Excellent.
Okay.
You've been listening to the GRCC Provost Podcast, produced by GRCC Media Technologies. Join us next episode for more Provost.